Cool.
From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. You are 1 week away from Valentine's Day, so be sure to head over to Pod Therapy to the online store and get your special something special, such as a therapy pillow, now known as the My Pillow. And now broadcasting from the churn, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
Is there really going to be the pillow in the store?
There will be. Okay, so here's the update on the pillows.
Yes.
I had to get a sample sent to me because I just could not tell what is this going to look like once it prints.
Right.
And it turned out amazingly well.
Oh,
so now
cool.
I have a Pod Therapy pillow.
Yes.
But I haven't designed the pillow yet. I still have to design that. And so we're still working on that, but that is in the works. It's going to happen.
Pod Therapy gift shop
point.
for all of your Valentine's Day needs. Also, a quick little disclaimer. If you get your special somebody Pod Therapy stuff, this may be your last Valentine's Day with them. So we're not responsible for damage done to relationships or your general well-being.
It has already pretty much damaged my relationship with the amount of samples, Pod Therapy samples that are now in the house.
You've done this to yourself.
Yeah.
I'm super excited for the pillow, though. I think that is one of the most clever ideas that people have tossed us, is to have a pillow in the gift shop. This is going to be hilarious. So we also need a Pod Therapy wiki. That's one of the many things about Ice Cream Social that I am jealous about. They have a wiki, which I've used, and it's really helpful. Like, if I don't know a reference that they're making in the show, I'll go to the wiki, and usually there's like some kind of deposit of like all this like inside jokes explained and guest references, and that actually really helps.
I had no idea you guys had a wiki.
Oh yeah, we don't do it.
Well, I know that.
We don't run it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So we're looking for volunteers. If you feel like creating our wiki, it's about time. We've gone on for 3 years.
Or if you don't, that's cool too.
Have references. Anyway, so we're going to start off with a powerful question. We wanted to start at the top of the show to make sure we had plenty of time to get into it, because I think it's something that really matters. Hey guys, I'm a fairly new listener, but I've listened to the whole back catalog as a nice palate cleanser from my usual true crime fascination. Not sure which one says more about my mental health.
I am sure of which one says more about your mental health.
10 plus years ago, as a high schooler, I struggled through several years of severe clinical depression, anorexia, cutting, and ultimately 3 suicidal attempts, all by different methods. My parents are not the type to believe in therapy, nor would they have had the resources to provide therapy for me at that time. They let it fester until, I guess, I, quote, outgrew it? I use that term loosely, as I know that's not how mental illness works. I'm a nurse now, and I have since returned to a healthy weight and quit cutting. 10 years cut-free this coming November. Well
Awesome.
done, writer. That's
Good.
fantastic. I do, however, still deal with what I've referred to as passive suicidal thoughts. I don't mean the stare into the void type thoughts, such as what would happen if I drove off that cliff, but more along the lines of coming home from a bad day of work or a fight with my husband, thinking the world would just be better off without me, knowing I have easy access to a large supply of my own personal meds and alcohol, but I have no intention of actually offing myself. I'm not actually tempted by my medications. I'm smart enough to know that the drugs I have access to aren't a foolproof plan. I know that driving into a tree is more likely to be an expensive, embarrassing mistake rather than a death sentence. I'm not on a literal or proverbial ledge, but yet, every once in a while, I wake up in tears because why did I have to wake up today? I guess it's more about the cessation of existence rather than wanting to die. For someone with a healthy mind, those two things might be equal, but I feel like there is a distinct difference between the two. I know you're going to say go to therapy. I tried discussing this with my therapist once, but it was brushed under the rug. But I'm still struggling, so any advice is greatly appreciated. Thanks, Joey. And by the way, Joey gave us pronouns of she and her, which is very very good. Thank you for that.
That is convenient.
That really
Thank
helps.
you.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
like that.
truly convenient. Thank you.
Okay, so you've tried therapy. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. I would say try a different therapist. Is probably one of the things I would do.
Yeah. There are two things that jumped out at me in the email, and that is towards the end there. She said that people with a normal mind might see this as blank, and the other one just flew out of my head. But that one, especially there. Don't look at other people as having a normal mind or an abnormal mind, or I mean, no one is more or less normal than you are as far as how your mind works.
Right.
This is just, like, people's minds just work however they work, and none of us fucking know how that is anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So don't worry about, like, don't even concern yourself with how other people's minds might or might not be working, because I promise you they are no less or more normal than yours is.
Yeah. Right. If my mind is an example of a normal mind,
then we're all fucked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would set your sights a little higher.
Yeah.
Because I have what I would call a functioning mind.
It functions for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I know what the other one was, and that was the you quote unquote grew out of it, and you know that's not how mental health works. We do change as we get older.
Yeah.
We change mentally and physically as we grow and get older and everything. Don't discount the fact that you grew in both mentally and physically. Don't discount that. I mean, that something did occur there that was a real thing.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because one of the things that we should focus on too, because sometimes we tend to get lost in the problem, not recognizing progress.
Yeah.
And you quit cutting, so that's 10 years without cutting. That's huge.
That's progress.
Yeah, that's amazing progress.
Progress is progress.
Exactly.
Right.
And the healthy weight, like, that's amazing progress as well. And not to say necessarily, I also want to clearly establish a difference and make sure that I'm explaining that even though we're putting these three things together, those three things don't necessarily mean that they go together, right? So anorexia does not necessarily equate to or go along with cutting, which also doesn't necessarily equate or go along with suicide, because that's one of the biggest discrepancies, one of the biggest misunderstandings that people have about mental health, especially having to do with cutting, is they always interpret cutting as this person is suicidal, and that's not the case.
Oh,
those
really?
two, yeah.
Oh,
Those most.
I didn't realize people necessarily equated those.
Yeah, because
Interesting.
I would get that all the time in the adolescent program that I worked at with parents. You know, that they would
Just
say,
terrified parents.
Yeah, my child's cutting. She's trying to kill herself,
Yes,
and I'd have to explain, no,
Not necessarily.
That's cutting behavior. That's not suicidal behavior.
Okay, neat.
So yeah, that's something we want to focus on. So even though those are three separate things, the skills, the talents, the things that you have been doing, the hard work that you've put into addressing those other two can still go towards addressing the third, right? So a lot of progress has been made. I have some other thoughts I want to share about this too, but I'll throw it over to Jim.
Yeah, so a couple of things here that are interesting to me. So first, let's start by congratulating you, writer. I mean, wonderful that you've hit a decade anniversary. And in the letter, you date yourself because you say, 10 years ago as a high schooler. So, Jim's basic math, you're somewhere in your 20s, right? And so that's huge that you've managed to not cut for 10 years. It's huge that you are at a healthy body weight. What that teaches me is that you've really developed good emotional management skills, coping skills, and self-care skills, because that's how those things start to get addressed, which is wonderful. The thing that you're talking about, I want to agree with Jacob and normalize it a little bit, because you're doing a good job of trying to paint as clearly as you can and saying, guys, it's not exactly an intrusive thought, because you probably expected we were going to latch on to when you say, what if I drive into that tree, and say, oh, that's just an intrusive thought that doesn't necessarily play too hard with suicidality. But you took it further than that, said it's not that, guys. It's sort of this existential thing, like waking up and feeling like, why do I exist? And there is a little bit of a self-hatred flavor that can kind of filter into that too, and a little bit of thinking about dying, right? But you're pacing yourself with that, and you're telling us, when I'm thinking about this, it's not like I'm going to do it. It's not like I have a plan. I'm not even on the edge. So for the general audience hearing a question like this, the very first quick little PSA I want to throw out there is the baseball diamond of suicidality. The way that a therapist often thinks about risk is using the three bases. First base is the person's thinking about death, is in despair, and it is often thinking about what it would be like to die. Second base is they have a how. They've thought carefully about practical ways they would do this. They have the means to do it. And then third base is a plan. They're starting to audition the idea of doing it, the when and the where, as along with second base is how. At that point, that's pretty dangerous. And that's when we're going to try to interrupt that. And then anything past third base, making their way home, is obviously an action. That's where things are actually happening. So the where I locate this writer based on what they're telling us, it sounds like they're saying, listen, guys, I'm very much on, I get to first base sometimes, right? I'm not sitting around all the time. I'm not thinking about this all the time. I've been further along. I've ran the bases before in my life, so I know where it gets dangerous. I sometimes get to first base, and sometimes I can see second base, where I think like, oh, how would I do this? Which, again, I want to normalize that. A lot of humans relate to that. A lot of humans relate to the existential dread of saying to themselves, why do I exist today? Should I just not be here? Would that be better for other people? And Ryder, it sounds like you're doing some really good self-care skills. You mentioned going to see a therapist. That one caught my ear because I do think Nick's right. At the end of the day, if you feel like you've stalled with your therapist, you are allowed to consider a change. That's okay. But I guess I'm curious. I wonder if I talked to that therapist in a clinical staffing meeting, and if I asked them what's going on in your case and what strategies they're using, I wonder if they would say, the patient sometimes brings up a suicidal ideation, but I don't see it as a real threat. I see it as mostly this kind of intrusive thought kind of thing, or just, not very serious. And they might tell me I'm trying not to put a lot of focus on that in session because I really want this person to work on emotional management or these other areas that I think will ultimately solve this problem downstream. So I don't know that. I don't know if that's how your therapist is thinking about it, but I guess I just want to leave room for that to potentially be part of the explanation, because sometimes a therapist is strategically not, I don't want to say not addressing, but not discussing certain things if they feel that they could do it better somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. Sometimes I know also another thing that happens is there's steps to getting to that.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to address,
makes sense.
Yeah, before we get into, if I'm working with somebody on trauma, before we're getting into really talking about the trauma, we need to build some healthy coping skills first that you're going to rely on once we actually get to that point. So that could be too. That
could be a plan.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think that's the big thing too, is just, having that open communication with your therapist, because you need to know what the plan is, right? I mean, you're paying for a service. You want this thing to be addressed. What is the plan with that? So maybe it's as simple as asking that question. This is something that's really important to me. I feel like we're not getting to it. Is there a plan to get to this? If so, what is that plan?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I think having that. And I, on the other end of that, as working in substance abuse counseling and all of that, whenever my clients would come at me with a question like, well, here's what I want to work on, how are we going to get to this? I love that, because then I felt like, oh, great. I didn't realize we weren't on the same page. Let's sit down and let's talk about that. So, yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it. Another thing that I was thinking of too, oh man, I just lost it. I need to start writing this stuff down. What was it?
Sorry,
I can't remember.
Can't bail you out on that one.
Yeah, no. Well, I know at one point.
What was Nick thinking?
I know at one point I was going to kind of touch on the whole the wonderful piece that I absolutely love about mindfulness meditation, which if you, listener, have listened to the whole back catalog, you know I've talked about that before. And just the understanding, not just about intrusive thoughts, but just any kind of thought. When we have something, to just be able to look at it as it being just a thought, not necessarily having any kind of meaning behind it, but it's just having that thought. But then again, I think that's a little bit different than what the writer's talking about, having to do with almost really kind of having an emotional feeling, an emotional reaction to simply existing,
It sounded almost more thoughtful than that, though, too. And the way I hear that email makes me think that the writer is almost pursuing this from a philosophical side, in a little bit here, more of an intellectual, philosophical side of it, which I don't know. I don't know if that's a thought process that I would encourage at this point. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not a bad thought. It's not a bad thing, but maybe something to not try to dwell on.
Right. Yeah.
At this point. Yeah.
Well, I think that one thing that's interesting here, the writer, you describe it as passive suicidal thoughts, which I appreciate, right? Because there's not a word for this, but you're sort of delineating it from active suicidal thoughts. And that's what you're trying to tell us. I'm not staring into the void. I'm not, wanting to die, which is where that word existence showed up in the letter, is you were kind of saying, listen, guys, it's not that I want to die. It's more like this sadness that I'm still around when sometimes I start to get down on myself. And so I guess, writer, when I hear that description, if I'm hearing it accurately, it does remind me of the precursor emotions that lead to cutting, the precursor emotions that lead to anorexia, the self-harmy kind of stuff, because it's like this difficult emotion to process and we don't know what to do with it, but it's very much touching shame and it's very much touching, self-criticism and just generally not esteeming us very highly. So I guess I want to normalize all that. I do believe that you're doing good work in therapy. I'm glad that you're going there. And again, if a patient of mine is describing a passive suicidal ideation that's not active, then I don't know that I feel, okay, let me deploy countermeasures. I guess I might hear that and say, okay, let me normalize that. Let's understand what's really happening. Let's make it clear that if it ever grows to another level, I should be told about that. But then let's continue to do emotional management skills, emotional processing skills with me, because we're starting to language these difficult to language things that even in the letter we don't necessarily know the right answer to describe. So I want to say all that because I do think you're doing the right thing. The only other thing that I would just kind of passively make a note about, and we've talked over the 3 years we've done this show, we have referenced medication before because that's part of our credo of being educators in this mental health space. But of course, medicine should always be discussed with your provider, your actual prescriber. That is their decision, is between you and them. However, I could see somebody, if they're experiencing this long term, and you didn't mention any use of medication, but it wouldn't be surprising if that kind of situation, the person was maybe talking to a psychiatrist and doing a consultation for some kind of light antidepressant just to kind of bring things into balances again. So, again, not my place to tell you to do that. I'll just be an educator to say it'd be interesting to talk about that with your therapist and see what they think about it, because perhaps this is more of just kind of a lingering kind of despair that's sort of just there. And if that can be sticky, sometimes medicine is a really great tool too. But I love that you're in therapy, and I love that you're talking about it. I like how you're describing it as passive suicidality. Again, I don't see it as active. It sounds like you're being safe and making sure that you're very thoughtful about creating, safety and accountability things. You're really good at describing all the ways that you could hurt yourself, writer. And it might just be that you're just trying to write a good letter and be descriptive. But I guess a little tiny red light kind of pops in my head when I hear that so well described. And I just think, make sure you're really clear with your therapist. I mean, how much of that second base stuff is happening? If you're having those how thoughts and it's increasingly sharp in your mind, I just want to make sure you guys are really talking about that because that's important and we want to stay ahead of the problem.
And to be fair, Joey says, I know you're going to say go to therapy. I tried discussing this in therapy once and it was brushed under the rug. I don't know if Joey's still in therapy or not,
good point.
or if it was something that was done in the past.
Yeah.
But either way, I would agree. I think especially we get this a lot, people have a bad experience with therapy and it kind of turns them off and they don't want to go back. If you are not currently in therapy, I would strongly encourage you to take a look and going back. I was actually going to say something similar to a pharmacological approach to this, maybe going along with psychotherapy. You don't have to pick one or the other. Sometimes the right approach is a mixture of both. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you've got, it's a therapeutic tool. Medication is what I'm referring to.
Yeah.
It's a therapeutic tool. So if we have it, it's available. Why not try it out? See if it'll be helpful.
It also sounds a little like you might be wading into the area that I think of as knowing how to talk to your therapist. It's a little bit of that in the letter as well. And kind of what Jim was saying, you write a good letter and you put it all together and you put it all out there in the way that the therapist is going to want to hear that. And I would say be a little introspective in that and don't talk to your therapist and talk to us or talk to whoever you're talking to about this. Don't talk to them in the way that you think that they might want to hear it. Just talk to them about it. Mm-hmm. Just tell them what you're feeling and what you're going through. And just do it in the way that you want to, not in the way that you think that they're going to want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Great advice there. Joey, what a good letter. And I hope that everybody that hears this can also appreciate that you can make incredible progress in your life. That if you're a person that's struggling with cutting, if you're a person struggling with anorexia, if you have had suicidal depression, that these things get better. And Joey is living proof that they get better. And we may still have a long-term maintenance strategy, and that's okay. That's excellent mental health maintenance. That is an excellent example. And Joey, I'm so glad you're making that example for the wider audience.
And again, great job on all the self-care that you've done up to this point already. It's wonderful. It's wonderful progress, and it's wonderful to hear that.
And real quick, for anybody else who happens to be going through the same thing, the number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. 8255. So give them a call if you need to.
And
I'm
Joey,
just glad they changed
under
it.
no
It used to be
circumstances
1-800
should you
These
watch
nuts.
the movie Up by Pixar.
That was a good movie.
That would not be helpful.
Good change. Right, exactly.
Great letter. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a similar topic. We're going to talk about when and how you might commit yourself to a mental health hospital. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Today's episode is brought to you by Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, Scott Jameson, and Scott Brady. Would you like to sponsor the show? Go to TheraProducer or become a TheraProducer at patreon.com/therapy. And our trivia theme this week, continuing from last week, is Forrest Gump. Here's a good one. You'll like this one.
Tom Hanks.
Damn it. No.
Surge.
Close. You were actually closer with the first one. According to IMDb, the author of Forrest Gump, Winston Groom, always imagined this actor portraying Forrest Gump.
Oh.
If you'd like to join the TheraProducers and make the show possible, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
Now, this isn't fair. I happen to know the answer to this.
Oh, do you?
Oh, my gosh.
And the answer is Harvey Keitel.
Oh, nailed it.
My name is Forrest Gump. People call me Forrest Gump.
I thought you were going to say Christopher Walken.
Oh,
Call me Forrest.
oh, that would have been a great
That'd
choice.
have been a good one. If I could do a Walken impersonation, I would have done it there.
Yeah.
That would insert Walken impersonation with that joke.
Do
please.
your own. Play along at home.
Brando.
Brando. It probably was Brando. You know what? That's actually a good guess.
Okay.
It's definitely not Brando.
It's not, but okay.
Yeah. I mean, it would be hilarious.
When did it come out? It came out in like the early 90s, right?
93-ish?
Yeah, but I don't know when the book came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the book wasn't that far. I don't think it was that much earlier.
No, it probably wasn't.
I
I
think
think it was a modern book.
just because somebody's played a similar character, I'm going to go with Dustin Hoffman. I'm going to go with Dustin Hoffman.
Okay.
Was
Dustin
the
Hoffman.
actor alive when the movie was made?
The actor is still alive.
The actor is still alive. Okay. Because
Sam
one guess
Jackson.
that I had was River Phoenix.
Oh. Okay.
All right. I will guess then Christian Slater.
Ooh.
Okay.
90s actors.
Okay. No, you're both wrong. John Goodman.
Ah.
All right.
John Goodman as Forrest Gump.
I like it.
Yeah, that would okay. That's an acceptable
It have
answer.
a little different flavor to it, but not necessarily bad.
No, I like John
can see
Goodman. Yeah, I would have
Christian
dug that.
Slater.
I think Christian Slater, that'd been a whole different movie.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. You know, Forrest should not be that sexy. Like Tom Hanks has an understated like handsomeness.
How dare you? No one is more sexy than the national treasure that is Tom Hanks.
All right, this is solid. I have nothing to say about that. All right, we got a good question here, and this one I think is super duper relevant. It says, when and how to commit yourself. Hey guys, can you please give advice on how and when or why one should commit themselves to a mental hospital, particularly if they are not already or currently seeing a therapist? Thanks, from someone who is actually struggling, in parentheses, aren't we all? Anonymous.
Okay. Well, I'll give you my take on this. It has to do with safety. So if you are a danger to yourself or someone else, you need inpatient. That's kind of the
Just
biggest
go do
thing.
it.
Yeah, you have to do it.
That's the big red line.
Yeah. If you're not, then most everything else can be done on an outpatient basis. But it really comes down to safety. If you're not able to take care of yourself, if you're afraid you're going to hurt yourself, or you're afraid you're going to hurt somebody else, or you are a caretaker and you're afraid you're not going to be able to care for somebody else, then I think those are the big signs in which you'd want to look at
Hurt yourself or someone else, actively or passively. Yeah. What about talk about?
I mean, the passive, I don't know so much.
I'm thinking that like as in you're not going to be able to care for someone that you need to be caring for, like an infant or an elderly person or something like that.
Okay.
You know, either actively hurt them or by inaction.
Oh, by inaction.
Hurt someone.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Okay, so not necessarily passive suicidal ideation.
No.
necessarily, but by your inaction, it's going to hurt.
It's going to hurt someone else. Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
What about and because that's all of the letter, right, Jim?
Yep, that was it.
What about could there be something to this in they feel that there is an issue that they are facing that needs more intense work than they feel like they're getting outpatient wise right now? Could this I'm just grasping at straws here.
Yes. So typically when we're talking about mental health, and jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but for the most part with mental health, we would increase the number of service hours you're getting on an outpatient basis. So, I mean, there's like mental health groups that you can go to, and you may be doing groups 3 days a week and seeing your individual therapist twice a week, and then maybe your psychiatrist once a week. So you can always increase the intensity of outpatient services. But really, when it comes to going inpatient, it really has more of a safety feature to it, and safety, but then also time to observe. Like, so for example, if you're committed against your will, a big part of that is because you've been deemed as being a danger to yourself or others, and professionals need time to observe you before you can be out on your own. So but otherwise everything else would pretty much be done on an outpatient basis.
Yeah, that's pretty much the situation. That the word commit, I think, is an important marker for us, Ryder, and I'm not sure how much you wanted us to lean on that word, but that zooms out into our eyes. And the reason why is because if a person is having some kind of medical issue, they might ask the question out loud, hey, when do I not go to my regular doctor appointment and just go to an ER, right? And there's a whole discussion about that. Like, oh yeah, when would you, go to an ER and get evaluated? But your question is using that word commit. And so we don't hear it as when should I go kind of check into a hospital. The word commit is a surrendering of your own autonomy. And so we've talked about this on the show before, but there are legal mechanisms in every single state where a therapist or the person, or in some cases a police officer, can put that person into a psychiatric hold, which is a Jedi mind trick where we squint at you really hard and point, and then you can't move, or it's admitting you into a hospital in this case. So
right.
That is something that has very strict guidance, and that's why we're using words like suicide, homicide. So for me to put somebody in a hospital against their will, or, sometimes they'll go along with it. They're not like screaming and fighting, but I'm putting them in there, and I'll make it clear to them. Like, you're not checking out. You're going to go until a psychiatrist releases you. And so I'm looking for very clear factors there. I'm looking for suicide, homicide. Okay, those are do not pass go, do not collect $200. If it's at the level of severity that we need to do something about it, you're going straight in. The other one is poor self-care. Whenever a patient can no longer care for their own hygiene, their own personal survival needs, their house is absolutely, not suitable for human habitation. They haven't eaten. They're not managing their bodies or themselves, and their life is in disarray. It can reach a level to where a healthcare provider will evaluate that and say, I'm going to take you to the hospital for a while. We're going to get things straightened out because this cannot continue.
But even that goes back to safety.
Yes. I mean,
because if you're not taking care of yourself, if your house is a mess, it's not just having a messy house. It's like if it gets to the point where it becomes a safety hazard,
exactly,
or you're not eating. Well, that's safety. That has to do with your health.
Yes, that's exactly it. And so that matters too. Another thing that can sometimes be part of this is if there is a psychotic breakdown. And so if the person is, completely outside of, reality and they're in active psychosis, it's a little bit harder to commit them for that. I think you'd have a lot more strength going in on your own and, saying, okay, I need help. But me putting you in there could be bad. So if we see self-mutilation, self-harming kind of behavior, danger to others, that will put you on a hold. Inability to practice self-care to the point where we don't believe that you're, safe for yourself anymore. These are the situations that we would put you on a hold. Now, I started my comments by pointing out that word commit just has a lot of power to it. Maybe that's not what you're writing about. Maybe you're saying, guys, I'm struggling. At what point do I need acute care service? At what point do I need to not punt on the waiting list 3 months to get into a therapist's office? At what point do I need to take more direct action? And I think our answer would be similar to what we're describing as being committed. If you're at a place in your life where you feel overwhelmed, you feel unsafe, you feel like this cycle is repeating itself and you are no longer able to practice self-care, or if you're abusing drugs or alcohol at a pretty strong rate, it is okay to walk right into an emergency room or an urgent care. And yes, many psych facilities have a front door kind of reality. A lot of times they don't. A lot of psych hospitals do not have a walk-in area where you can be evaluated. They receive from the hospital. And so you would go to an ER, you'd present yourself to the triage nurse, and you describe what you're going through. And they can evaluate right there.
Seems like they should have what?
Seems like a mental health hospital facility should have just a walk-in area.
A lot
kind of a quick care type thing at the front.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot of communities have like mental health drop-in centers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which are actually really useful. A lot of people don't realize that, but just kind of a place where you can just go, you can just show up, and there's other people there. And if you're just kind of feeling out of it that day, you can just go in, hang out. You don't have to talk to anybody, but you can. It's kind of a safe zone. So that would be another thing to look at too, I would say. I mean, if you're already in therapy, I would talk to your therapist about trying to get some kind of referrals to groups. I think mental health groups are very underutilized. But also part of that probably has to do with insurance and how that's all being paid for as well. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the case. And to answer that question there, it depends on the kind of hospital that it is. Psych hospitals, a lot of times they don't want to have a walk-in zone because of the overlap between mental health and social services. And it can just become a parking lot, basically, for people that may be homeless or intoxicated, which does not facilitate good management of their symptoms if they can't be, brought in, and then they're just parking in that lobby zone. It could just be a little bit too dangerous to have just a straight up walk in. So they usually want to have people transferred because, and this is another thing that's interesting, a lot of times before you're transferred to a true psych hospital, you're going to have a physical evaluation, an H&P. And so that's usually going to be done at the ER. And then they'll transfer you after they have warranted that you are safe for transport and that you are physically, in a good place. Then you just need psychiatric services. But, I want everybody out there to hear this. Now, it's tricky because there's a lot of people that have anxiety. And sometimes in our anxiety, we wonder if we should go to a hospital. And there's a very common acting out inside of anxiety where people that are anxious sometimes drive near an ER. And they'll park their car in the ER parking lot, and they're wondering if they should go in because they're overwhelmed, and they struggle with that. And there's a lot of unnecessary procedures and tests that they sometimes rack up in their fear and their health anxiety and their panic of wondering they're going to be okay. So I need to caveat that while I'm okay with anybody going to an ER for any reason, that is the front door to healthcare. That is okay. If you feel overwhelmed or in danger, it's okay to go there. I also want to be a voice that tells you, writer, I'd love for you to make an appointment with a therapist. I'd love for, somebody to be on the ground level evaluating you, because a lot of times therapists are going to have a procedure for an emergency. And in your intake information, they'll say, hey, listen, now that you're under my care, if you're ever in danger, here's what I want you to do. Here's how we're going to, prepare for that. Here's a safety procedure. And they can also kind of coach you as far as how they want you to react in given situations. Because you didn't say anything in there, writer, about what conditions you're struggling with. And so it's really hard for us to weigh in on exactly how to help with that. But this is where we want you to talk to an outpatient therapist, because they're on the ground, they're in your life, they can evaluate you, and they can make some useful decisions. And they can tell you, hey, based on these presenting conditions that the Pod Therapy guys don't even know about, based on these presenting conditions that I'm talking to you about today, here is the line. Here is the red line in which I would want you to present yourself to this particular hospital, and here's how we would do that. So at the end of the day, getting that outpatient help, making an appointment with a therapist at any level, writer, is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It's a great question.
It is a great question. And it's something I think a lot of people are curious about. There is such thing as being overwhelmed, guys. There is such thing. I mean, I had somebody ask me the other day, is a mental breakdown a real thing? And I kind of answered that by saying it's not a clinical term, but I think it's a human term. And I think we humans all know what that feels like to just hit a wall in life. And maybe we do need to just, park ourselves and sort of be put into residential care for a while. That can happen in a human story. And again, it's not your job to know exactly when you should or shouldn't have that. If you feel that it's time to be evaluated, present yourself for evaluation. That's 100% of your job. Then the healthcare providers that are there are supposed to take over. They will make decisions based on what they believe they're seeing, and that's their job. So, writer, if you ever feel like you need to go check in, or you feel like you're in danger, do not hesitate. Do not spend time, listening to this show wondering, is it the right thing? Is it a yellow light or is it red? No. Go. Okay? Go. And make an appointment with a therapist and make sure that that's somebody you're also including into your care team, because obviously you're struggling. I love your honesty, and we definitely want to make sure you're looking at all good resources in your life. Okay? Avail yourself of that. And remember, if you're ever in danger, dial 911.
Yes. Is there a downside to going?
Nope.
Is there a potential downside to going? I don't know of one, but I don't want to say something stupid like there's no downside to going, and then you're both like, oh, well, except for this. I don't think there is.
Not really. No.
No, a lot of people are afraid that it goes on their permanent record and there's some kind of special healthcare database. There is not. It does not go on your permanent record. It is not going to stop you from getting a gun if you're a person who likes the Second Amendment community or something like that. You're not going to take your gun away. You're not going to lose your kids. Nothing bad happens by seeking healthcare. Okay, you're allowed to go. Yeah, there's financing and stuff like that can sometimes be frustrating. But at the end of the day, the healthcare system is there to help you. You dial 911 if you're in danger or you need to talk to somebody, and it's their job to figure it out from there. A lot of people don't take that first step because they're not sure what they need. Don't do that. Just call.
If there is a problem that we have as a society, it's not too many people accessing mental health care when they don't need it.
Right.
It's people who need it not being able to or not doing it. So Yeah, I don't see any downside.
I have friends that are 911 operators, and the training that they go through just to deal with people calling in about their own mental health care is extensive.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
It is surprising to me how extensive it is. It was, when I had one friend who used to be a sound engineer in town, and she changed careers and is now a 911 op, and she was explaining to me a lot of the mental health training that she was receiving, and I was amazed, pleasantly so, by the large amount that was going into that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was like, this is great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And very encouraging. So Ryder,
Yeah.
if you feel like you're overwhelmed, in danger, suicidal, homicidal, or you just aren't sure, don't sit around guessing. You can dial 911, or you can dial 311. It's usually the non-emergency line in your community. Some communities have a 211 number for mental health. There's actually a law that's being discussed right now in Washington to create a national 211 number for mental health emergency that would always be reliable. So no matter what, if you dial 311 or 911, their job is to put you where you're supposed to be, okay? And you can do that. Nothing wrong with that. But
Or if you need
always
to just
be
show up
safe.
at an emergency room, show up at an emergency room.
That's right. Nothing wrong with that. But great question, Ryder. A lot of people, I think, needed that answer. And we're rooting for you, my friend. Please write to us again and let us know when you're making some progress with this and how you've done that. We just want to be, your friends and support you as you're doing this. But I'm glad you're writing in. That's a great sign that you're pointing in the right direction. All right, we're going to take a second break, and when we come back, we're going to quickly discuss how to address your wandering eye in your 40s. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Today's episode is brought to you by Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, Scott Jameson, and Scott Brady. Would you like to sponsor the show? Become a therapy producer at patreon.com/therapy. And our second trivia question, keeping with our theme of Forrest Gump. Every still photo of Forrest Gump seen in the movie has this consistent feature.
Photoshop.
If you'd like to join the therapy producers and make the show possible, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
My answer is those are real photos from history, and they just Photoshop Tom Hanks into the photo.
I don't think so. Are they all? They're not all black and white, are they?
Nope.
No.
Because the ping pong one, his stand-up cardboard.
Oh yeah,
thing,
yeah.
His color.
Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Jim is right. Maybe it's they're just actual photos that have been doctored.
That's what I think.
Okay. So Jim and Jacob agree. Okay. And you're wrong.
Damn it.
No. The one consistent feature in all of the still photos of Forrest Gump.
Oh, his eyes are closed.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
His eyes are closed.
That's awesome. That is solid. Yeah, that's right. Now I remember. The joke is his eyes are always closed. Speaking of eyes, we have a pretty good letter here, short and sweet. Good day, gents.
Look at that segue.
Beautifully done.
Nailing it. Good day, gents. I'm in my 40s, and I've been faithfully and happily married for 15 years. But every once in a while, I still come across someone who makes me think, damn, I'd like a piece of that. Does psychology say if this is ever going to pass? Asking for a friend. Cheers. CMS and using the he, him, and his pronouns. Thank you for giving us the pronouns. That really helps facilitate conversation.
This is an email from Jim.
He's not in his 40s yet.
That's true.
That's right. So I'll see my way out of this.
He changed one fact.
Nick's turning 40 in like a couple of months. So what do you think there, Nick?
I don't have a psychological answer to that. I have a biological answer to that.
Okay, go
which
ahead.
is just that's kind of the lizard brain. You see somebody attractive, it's going to catch your attention.
Yeah.
Will it pass? I don't know. I'm not a biologist, but I think it probably would when you get to that age where it's kind of past producing offspring, maybe at that point. But
I don't think so. I don't think it passes.
There's a lot of
You
horny
don't
old
think so?
men
I
out
don't
there,
think so.
and a lot of
I
horny
think
old
you notice.
lizards too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
I
That's
think you're
true.
just going to notice.
Yeah. So I guess the big question is it problematic? That's what I would ask our writer.
Yeah.
Is it causing any kind of problems?
His significant other keeps going like, "Hey,
Yeah.
cut that out."
Yeah.
then it's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I do see that a lot, actually, in a lot of couples, that like that's kind of an issue where it's like you're driving down the street and you see a young woman jogging, you just kind of glance over and and sometimes that causes some frustration.
I'll tell you, we haven't been out much lately, and so my my don't snap my head over there reflex
has weakened.
Yeah, that is not as strong as it usually is, not as honed as it usually is. I was in a casino last night for a professional reason, doing some work for someone, and walking out. It's like, oh right, these people are in casinos. People who are vacationing. A lot of them are dressed up, real sexy, and they're looking good. They're looking their best, going through everything. And man, I sure did turn my head at somebody last night, and they sure did catch me.
Really?
Yep, they catch me, and they kind of grinned and laughed, and I kind of grinned and laughed back, and kept walking.
Yeah,
but I was still like, yep, got caught there.
Yeah,
the popping sound in your neck muscle gave
exactly.
it away.
But like the lizard brain part is way quicker than the executive funcking frontal cortex.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's
why
always
we should always wear sunglasses.
That's right. Yeah, actually, not a bad
Mirrored
idea.
sunglasses.
That's the solution to your trouble. Yeah, I don't know
so.
that it ever goes away. I do think that there's a dimming of, that as testosterone levels fade. I won't discuss the lizard brain thing, but I'll say that I would say biochemicals like testosterone probably, as they drop, that should see a decrease in general libido. I think that's a lot of people discuss that, but I don't think that there's any rule for that. And so I guess the first thing I'd want to do is normalize it. I think that there's a lot of folks out there that feel very insecure and threatened if their mate does notice an attractive person. And I think I would want to be a voice that wants to normalize that it is sort of this human instinct that's happening. Your mate should be responsible for their behaviors, right? And be responsible for everything they do with that emotion or that notice. But I don't want people to be punished for it. I don't want people to be shamed for it if we can avoid that, because I think that's super duper problematic. But yeah, Ryder, I don't know. I think it'll start fading with age, but also it might not, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just stay the course and get some dark sunglasses.
I mean, I do think normalizing it is important.
Yes.
Because that has always irritated me too, when there's like a kind of there's a difference between having an immediate reaction like Jacob did versus then acting on that reaction. Like if Jacob just like, okay, I had that reaction, now I'm just going to continue to stare.
Sure. So you think
now I'm going to...
you think my follow-up response of just going like, ow! Yeah. was perhaps inappropriate?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If I was your significant other,
yeah,
I would not have been upset with the glance.
Yeah.
The cat calls, that would have gotten me.
Lizard
we'll have
calls.
to agree to we'll agree to disagree.
Gecko calls are discouraged.
Yeah.
The scales on that.
You carrying hams around in those pants? That's looking good.
I'd like to buy you a fish
That
sandwich.
is honey glazed. Spiral cut. I'm just hungry. I'm just ready for lunch.
Yeah, I am too. I'm going to get some Popeyes on the way home.
Well, that sound means it's time for us to close the show, that gurgling sound in Nick's stomach. We want to thank our TheraProducers. If you have subscribed to the show at patreon.com/therapy at any level, we tape every 2 weeks, so we will catch you on the next one. If we didn't catch you last time, we will thank you. Always remember you can go to our Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, where we acknowledge every single person who does anything on Patreon. If they make any kind of motion with the giving level, we always acknowledge it right away. So you'll see that shout out there, but you'll hear it on the show next week. But we do want to thank our TheraProducers. Thank you to the Elite 8, the Saccharin 16, the Elite 8, I got to get rid of that, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of the fan club. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Elio Dare, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Dawn, Crazy Banana Scoop, Mason Miller, Scott Jameson, Carolyn Albert, Leon Kassab, and thanks for the shirt, Leon, Dan Martin, Reverend Scoop Kevin, Malaya, and Scott Brady.
Ow!
See, now that was appropriate.
Damn, they're looking good.
That was appropriate, because they do look good. You can't help that.
They're looking good.
You can't help that. That's instinct. If you would like to hear this episode uncut and unedited,
And why wouldn't you?
Enjoy our spontaneous side projects. Go to patreon.com/therapy. And thank you for supporting mental health.
That's all the time that we have for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, Pod Therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it by opening the episode description in your podcast app and copying and pasting that link provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tanchman.
I'm Leon Phelps.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
The latest man.
Ooh, a lady. It's the first movie that my now wife and I ever watched together.
Oh, really?
It's the Ladies' Man movie.
Yeah. Well, couples that watch that movie together stay together.
That's right.
Statistically.
That's right.
Yeah.